Hello everyone and welcome. Today we are kicking off a series on one of the most fascinating groups of plant hormones, the gibberellins, often just called gabble right after auxins. Gibberellins are the second major class of growth regulators that orchestrate how plants grow and develop. So what exactly do they do? You might have heard that gibberellins are all about making stems longer. That's their most famous job, promoting stem and internode elongation, but their influence extends much further. Gibberellins are involved in a huge range of developmental processes. They help seeds break dormancy and germinate. They play a crucial role in triggering flowering, and they're essential for proper fruit development. They even influence pollen formation and the growth of the pollen tube. Chemically speaking, all gibberellins are what we call tetracyclic diterpenoid acids. That's a bit of a mouthful, but it simply means their structure is built around 4 carbon rings and they are derived from a 20 carbon molecule. It's a massive family with over 130 different gibberellins identified so far, labeled as GA1, GA2, GA3, and so on. But here's the interesting part. Despite this huge number, only a handful are actually biologically active. The main players that drive most of the growth you see in plants are GA1, GA3, which you might know as gibberellic acid, GA4, and GA7. The story of how we discovered gibberellins is just as interesting as what they do. It all starts in early 20th century Japan with a peculiar rice disease. Rice farmers started noticing that some of their seedlings were growing abnormally tall and spindly. These plants were so weak they couldn't even support their own weight and would just fall over. Farmers called them bakane, which translates to foolish seedlings, because while they grew tall, they were useless, producing almost no grain and causing major crop losses. Scientists eventually figured out that this strange overgrowth was caused by a fungal infection. In 1926, a scientist named Kurosawa made the connection, realizing that a substance produced by the fungus was responsible for the abnormal growth. A few years later, in the 1930s, Yabuta and Sumuki successfully isolated and identified this growth-promoting substance from the fungus, which was then known as Gibberella fujikuroi. And that's where the name gibberellin comes from, the fungus Gibberella. It wasn't until the 1950s that researchers in Britain and the US confirmed that these same compounds were also naturally present in higher plants, not just in this one fungus. By the way, that fungus has since been reclassified and is now known as Fusarium fujikuroi. Now let's dive a little deeper into the chemical nature of gibberellins. As we mentioned, they are diterpenes, which means they are built from 4 isoprene units. The journey to a gibberellin molecule starts with a precursor called geranyl diphosphate, or GPP for short. Through a series of steps involving intermediates like encorini, the plant eventually constructs the characteristic 4-ring structure of a gibberellin. It's a complex process, and many of the gibberellins you find in a plant are actually inactive precursors or breakdown products to make sense of the huge family of gibberellins. Scientists classify them based on their number of carbon atoms. We have C20GAs, which contain 20 carbons. These are typically the inactive precursors. Then we have the C19GAs, which have 19 carbons. These are formed when one carbon atom is removed from a C20GA, and this group includes the most biologically active forms. Remember those key players we talked about: GA1, GA3, GA4, and GA7. They are all C19 gibberellins, and they're the ones that get the job done in the plant. Finally, where can you find these hormones? Gibberellins are pretty much everywhere in the plant kingdom. They are synthesized in areas of active growth. You'll find high concentrations in young leaves, developing seeds and embryos, and at the very tips of roots. They are also abundant in elongating stems and growing vegetative buds. Essentially, wherever the plant is growing and developing, you can be sure that gibberellins are hard at work. That wraps up our introduction to gibberellins. We've covered what they are, their fascinating discovery, their chemical nature, and where they're found. Join me in the next video where we'll explore their biosynthesis and how they are transported within the plant. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.